She was thrown out before the blood on her dress had even dried. The women of the town whispered sharp as rattlesnakes, and the men turned their eyes away like cowards. A girl with triplets, 3 tiny wailing daughters born under the shadow of midnight, was not a blessing in their eyes but a curse, a burden, a scandal. She staggered into the dirt road barefoot, clutching the bundled infants to her chest, her face pale from loss and shame. The tavern door slammed behind her with the finality of a gunshot. The night was cold, and the wind smelled of dust and horse sweat. She leaned against a post, too weak to move, whispering prayers that tangled with her sobs. "Please, just live," she begged the newborns, their tiny fists clawing for life. From across the street, a tall figure stood motionless in the shadows. He had been there for hours, leaning on a post outside the livery stable, his hat brim pulled low to hide his eyes. Folks called him, the silent rancher, a man who spoke little but carried the weight of 100 storms behind his stare. No one knew his first name, no one dared to ask. Some said he'd killed more men than cholera, others that he'd buried a wife and child out in the desert and left his tongue with them. When the tavern keeper shoved her into the dirt, the rancher didn't move. Not when she fell, not when she wept, not when the babies cried loud enough to wake the dead. But then, he took a step. His boots crushed the dust, each footfall louder than the jeers of the drunkards who'd gathered at the door to watch her shame. The crowd quieted as he crossed the street, his long coat swaying, spurs chiming like iron bells. He stopped in front of her, his shadow spilling over her like a shield. She lifted her tear-streaked face, expecting another insult, another boot to the ribs. Instead, his gloved hand reached down. He said only one thing, his voice deep and jagged, like rocks grinding in a canyon. "Come." The crowd gasped. She blinked through her tears. What did you say?" His eyes burned like coal under the hat's brim. "Come with me." No one dared laugh. The tavern keeper swallowed hard, suddenly pale, and shut the door with a bang. The street emptied fast. Only the rancher and the girl remained, and the desert wind howled like it carried secrets. Her body trembled as she tried to stand. He took the weight of her arm in his, firm but steady, then looked at the bundles she clutched. 3 little faces squirmed inside the ragged cloth. His jaw tightened. Without another word, he led her down the street. The livery boy peeked through the window, whispering, "Lord help her, she don't even know who she's following." But she didn't care. She had no one else. The rancher's horse, a coal-black stallion with eyes as wild as its master's, stamped the ground when they approached. He lifted her into the saddle as though she weighed nothing, then swung up behind her, the babies cradled between them. The town lights faded quick as they rode into the black mouth of the desert night. For hours, silence stretched, broken only by the horse's hooves and the baby's thin cries. She pressed them close, rocking them against her breast, whispering lullabies through cracked lips. Finally, she found her voice. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why would you help me?" He didn't answer. His arm around her waist tightened, steadying her when the stallion leapt a creek bed. His silence was heavier than words, and she wondered if she had followed a savior, or a wolf in man's skin. By dawn, a cabin rose on the horizon, perched alone against a line of jagged hills. Weather-beaten, scarred by sandstorms, but solid. Smoke curled from the chimney. He dismounted, helped her down, and took the infants from her trembling arms with surprising gentleness. One by one, he laid them in a wooden cradle inside the cabin, a cradle far too small for 3, but better than dirt and dust. She sagged against the doorframe, staring. You live out here alone." His gaze flickered over the worn rocking chair, the rifle mounted on the wall, the faded quilt folded with care. His silence told her yes. Days bled into weeks. She cooked with trembling hands, swept the dirt floor, mended shirts she found in a chest. The rancher worked on to dusk, herding cattle, fixing fences, chopping wood. He returned with rabbit or venison slung over his shoulder, sometimes fresh milk, sometimes nothing at all but exhaustion. He never spoke more than a few words: eat, rest, careful. But at night, when the babies cried, she often woke to see him standing by the cradle, his massive frame bent awkwardly, rocking them with a patience that made her throat ache. He never smiled, but his eyes softened, if only for a breath. Still, fear not at her. Who was he, this man of shadows? Why had he taken her in when the town cast her out? One evening, as the desert bled red under the sinking sun, she asked again. "What do you want from me?" He didn't look up from sharpening his knife. The blade sang against the stone. At last, he said, "Nothing. Nothing." His jaw flexed. "I seen what happens when folks turn their backs. Won't do it again." Her heart raced. Again. But he said no more. Rumors soon slithered into town. The girl who birthed triplets was alive, living with the silent rancher. Whispers turned to stories, stories to lies. Some said he'd stolen her. Some claimed she was his whore. Others swore she was cursed, and he'd taken her to appease the devil. Men spit her name in the dirt, and women crossed themselves when they passed the hills. One night, a lantern flickered outside the cabin. Then another. Then 10. Voices shouted through the darkness. "Send the witch out. She brought a curse on the town. And he's hidin' her, just like he hid his sins before." The rancher loaded his rifle slow, calm as a rattler. His eyes met hers. She clutched her babies tight, her lips trembling. "They'll kill us." He stepped to the door, shoulders broad enough to block it. "They'll try." The mob roared as they climbed the hill, lanterns waving like fireflies from hell. The first shot cracked through the night. Glass shattered, wood splintered. The babies wailed. She screamed, but the rancher did not move. He stepped out into the open, rifle raised. One shot, one man down. Another shot, another fell. The mob faltered, lanterns shaking. His silence was louder than their fury, his wrath swifter than their hate. When the smoke cleared, the hillside was littered with groans and curses. The survivors dragged the wounded back into the dark. Not one dared look back. The rancher returned to the cabin, face hard as stone. His hands shook as he set the rifle aside. She saw it, the tremor, the shadow of something deeper than rage. She stepped close, her voice breaking. "Why did they fear you? What did you do?" His eyes burned into hers, and for the first time, he spoke more than a few words. "I had a wife. A little girl. Buried 'em both out here when the fever came. Town turned its back. Said God was punishin' me. Left me to dig the graves alone. Since then, I don't ask no one for nothin'. Don't give nothin' back. Until you." Her breath caught. The pieces fell into place, the cradle, the quilt, the silence. "They think you're cursed," she whispered. "Let 'em." His voice cracked like dry timber. "I'll carry it." Her tears blurred the lamplight. Slowly, she reached for his hand, rough and scarred from years of labor and loss. He didn't pull away. The babies whimpered in their cradle. Their tiny bodies fragile but alive. She looked at him and saw not a curse, but a man carved hollow by grief, who had chosen to fill the emptiness with something, someone, he didn't understand but couldn't abandon. For the first time since her exile, she felt steady. And for the first time since his silence began, he let himself breathe.